So today we're going to be going back into political history with the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire. Some of this stuff you might know, but we're going to talk about why the Republic fell and how the Emperor kind of grew up in its shadow, because that's going to help you understand a lot more of the Empire. So, when did the Republic begin?
576 BC.
So close.
509.
509.
Was 576 another day?
476 is the official fall. So in 509 BC, the Republic began. And it began with a group of people who were trying to overthrow the monarchy. The idea of single-person rule was no longer attractive to the Romans. They wanted to have something divided among lots of people. But as it happens, the way that the Republic was shaped was that power was distributed among really just the wealthy. The patricians, the wealthy upper class people, controlled most of the government, right? They controlled the Senate, they controlled the executive branch of the consulship, they controlled the ideal positions, etc. What about for themselves?
Tribunes.
Tribunes, and then nothing, yes. And as we illustrated with our Claudius story, even this one nod to the plebeian class was often abused and was often, taken advantage of by the upper class.
Wait, so that wasn't uncommon to become a plebeian and plebeico?
No, but it was common for the office of the tribune to be sort of bought and paid for, so that the patricians would decide who was the best candidate for them to run as tribune, and they would, finance their campaign. They would, kill their opponents, or whatever it took to get them in office. Yeah, no, I mean it became quite corrupt. Right. So the virtues that founded the Republic were not the same virtues that were around in the late 1st century BC, when everything started to go to pot, as they say. So the late 1st century BCE also saw the rise of your friend and mine, Mr. Julius Caesar. He was an accomplished military general. He conquered Gaul, as you know. He came back. He fought with Pompey. In a civil war. He eventually conquered Pompey and became, realistically, the only political leader at the time. So in essence, he just fulfilled the role of being dictator. It's not that weird to think of him as a dictator if you remember your Roman Republican history. The Republican government structure allowed for having an emergency dictator. So, yeah, like Cincinnatus. So when the world was chaotic, when the world was troubled, an emergency dictator would often be appointed. Usually it was for a 6-month period of time, but that could be renewed for up to a year. After the Civil War, there was a lot of chaos, right? There was a power vacuum. Pompey had died. Pompey had been the consul. All of the nobles had sided with Pompey. So what else are you going to do but be dictator? The problem was Caesar liked it. And you weren't supposed to like it. You were supposed to be like Cincinnatus and do your job and then go home. He didn't go home. And that's what the people started to really dislike about him. So, as you know, he was assassinated, right? Does anyone remember when he was assassinated?
Ides of March, 44 BC.
As in, yeah?
The Ides of March.
Yes. Yes. He was assassinated on Idibus East. How many days away are we from the Ides?
None.
No,
Oh,
right now?
right now.
It's
Tara says
Ante
yes.
diem,
Ante diem, I.
Idus.
There you go. Very nice. So what you all will be doing on Sunday morning in black, the usual, right? He was assassinated chiefly by a group led by Brutus, which you know from the iconic quote Brutus or Et tu Brute, excuse me, and Cassius. They led the assassination.
This was like his best friend, right?
Well, sort of. Yeah.
Wasn't there another guy named Brutus? And he like overthrew the monarchy.
Yep. They could have been. Well, we talked about this back in September. It could be the same last name. It could just be a coincidence. Like, what are the chances that you're related to other Brennans in the world? Slim. You could be, though, Right. So, yes, same name. All right. So, Brutus and Cassius were the ones who led the conspiracy to assassinate. So, after the assassination... What's that?
They killed Cassius. They killed him.
Yeah.
They killed all the senators.
No, but they killed the senators who sympathized with this side.
Wait, who said?
Brutus and Cassius.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
And they also killed them.
He was stabbed like 50 something.
Right. Allegedly. But I've actually, I've seen this really fascinating Discovery Channel special that it is physically, like by the laws of physics, it is impossible for the alleged number of senators to each have stabbed him the number of times that he was stabbed. I think it was like 44 times, 63 times or something like that, without stabbing each other in the process. So a lot of that's mythology.
Wait, but so did, I feel like I've learned that the senators did
They
that.
They like cut their hands.
I don't know that.
I just
Not that I'm
remember one
discounting,
video
I
that
just
was
don't know
really
that.
funny when they were stabbed.
Yeah.
Couldn't they just like walked up, stabbed him, and then the next guy stabs him?
And then
Walked
take
up,
it
and
away.
the next
Stay
guy
still
stabs
for
him.
that.
Just like a system, just like I want to stab him.
No, it's kind of like a frenzy attack.
But the mythology is that he had,
Yeah.
let's say, 60 stabbed wounds.
Yeah.
I guess they could have stabbed him on the ground once he
Yeah.
collapsed, but
To blame people.
they might have. They might have. Like a squad in 2015. Or they do
Is
so.
that why they do firing squad?
Yep, that's why they do firing squad, so that no one knows which bullet was the one that killed him.
That's not feels bad.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't want to be haunted by that. You were.
Like, here's the guy who like sticks in the needle.
That's a completely separate issue. We don't have time to talk about that. All right. Antony was a former compadre, if you will, of Caesar. So he was an associate. He took out Caesar.
Yeah, I know. Just thinking.
What's that?
Also, Jesus Christ.
Yes. True. All right. So Antony killed Brutus and Cassius at a very famous battle called the Battle of Philippi. Of Philippi. So then Antony returns to Rome, triumphant as it is, and begins the second triumvirate with two other guys. One of whom is Lepidus, who, with all due respect, is kind of a throwaway character. He doesn't mean quite as much to us as the other guy, whose name is Octavian. He is the grandnephew of Sebastian's newest favorite, JC.
Oh, no, I mean, I didn't really favor.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. So he's the grandnephew. Now, at the time, he was about 18, give or take. I'm not a huge dates person, so I'm not really going to expect you to be a huge dates person, except for like big ones, you know. So he's about 18. Although he was named the heir in Caesar's will, people thought that he was too young to actually be like the one guy to succeed Caesar. You know, 18 is pretty young to take on a country the magnitude of Rome. So it kind of made sense. So they split rule in the second triumvirate. They split control over Rome. Lepidus stayed in Italy. Octavian stayed in like the western part, and then Antony stayed in the east. And in the east, we have a little country called Egypt. Yep. So in Egypt, Antony is sent specifically to Cleopatra, who is as of Egypt at the time. Now, Egypt was not just a province to the Romans. Egypt was actually a source of plentiful wealth. Egypt had a lot of products that Rome wanted to be able to trade with, specifically papyrus. They were the Mediterranean leader of papyrus production. So Antony was sent to Cleopatra in Egypt, but he was sent because, as you can imagine, Rome didn't want to just sort of operate in tandem with another potential superpower. They kind of wanted to control Egypt. It makes sense, right? So Antony gets to Cleopatra and Egypt, and he sees a beautiful woman who has lots of power, and he falls in love.
You know any story about like the carpet?
That's Caesar.
Oh.
So he falls in love with Cleopatra. Here's the problem. Cleopatra sees this new Roman coming to town, Antony, and thinks, aha, I could get Egypt to become the next superpower of the Mediterranean if I can control Rome. So she has a relationship with Antony. They don't actually get married. She bears him several children, but she is not in the relationship for the same reasons that Antony is.
He died at 16. Is that not true?
No, that's when she met Caesar. That's when her whole life began.
I've been so confused on that. Like, when I was little, I thought I heard she died at 16.
No.
It was in like a Jimmy Neutron episode.
How's it such a
I was
great
like, how did all this happen?
And then
So-
then the girl gets hairstyle.
Okay, you know.
Antony is in love with this woman, and he becomes to sort of Egyptize his life in a lot of different ways. He starts to favor Egypt. And Octavian realizes that here's, my number 2 guy, and he is starting to fall by the wayside. He's starting to have allegiance to someone else who's not Rome. So he tries to bring him back into the fold by offering his sister. He offers Octavia in marriage. Now, when I say offer, he kind of maybe made Antony marry Octavia, his sister. Oops. What's that?
I said that's totally not weird at all.
No.
Not back then.
Antony took her as a wife, kind of, but he carried on his affair with Cleopatra. Now, in the movie, Cleopatra, which it may or may not be different from the actual history, but in the movie, apparently, Antony rewrites his will and decides that he wants to be buried in Egypt. Whoa, that is kind of traitorous, right? To someone in ancient Rome who is really very loyal to Rome and Roman virtue and Roman superiority, etc. So Octavian feels as though there is no other option than to go to battle with the two of them. So we have a battle of Antony and Cleopatra joining for Octavian.
There's a question on the other one.
Unfortunately, you can't tell me anymore. It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not going to be, spreading the word. I'm not going to go on Facebook right now. All right, so they battle against Octavian together. The battle takes place at Actium. So those who answered the question are starting to figure out if he did it right or wrong. Just to clarify, though, Octavian himself did not fight. Agrippa was the one who fought. Agrippa led the naval command. Now, this is, relatively significant. Octavian, you see, was kind of a sickly kid growing up. He had a lot of health issues. And sure enough, the Battle of Actium, the day of the battle comes along, and he's too sick to fight. So Agrippa goes out and leads the charge. So as it happens in the battle, Cleopatra is on her ship, and she sees who she thinks is Antony getting on board the Roman ship. She thinks she sees the ship burning. She thinks Antony has been killed by the Romans. So she turns her ship around and starts sailing back to Alexandria. Meanwhile, back on the sea, Antony was not on Octavian's boat. He was not burned by the Romans. He was alive and well. He had sent out another ship in his place. But he is there watching his love, his ally, sail home. He thinks he's being abandoned by her. And he does not want to be abandoned by her. So he turns his ship around and they go back to Egypt, and then they both look at each other on the shores of Egypt like, I thought you were. Right. So having retreated from this fairly epic battle, politically speaking, they realize that at this point they have no other course but to surrender to the Romans and let the Romans just sort of control them. However, Cleopatra does not want to be ruled by the Romans, so she commits suicide. Antony, madly in love, can't live without Cleopatra, commits suicide as well. Exactly.
Oh, I thought like
Wait,
they
is it
just see each
Cleopatra
other
died
and like
and then-
Cleopatra went back
What
and
happened?
killed herself.
Cleopatra died, and Antony committed
Did she
suicide
get
afterwards. No. She
killed herself.
she killed herself. She let a snake into her bed to bite her, an asp. It's in the REM song. Yeah, probably. Antony almost did not have the courage. That's why he had to fall on a sword, because he couldn't actually stab himself. Not that stabbing yourself is like an easy thing to do, but yeah.
How did suicide stop Rome taking over Egypt?
She herself did not want to be subject to Rome's control. She cared more about herself, standing for her country, than she did the country itself. Yeah.
So if she was manipulating, if she was manipulating Antony, why did she turn around and thought he was dead?
Because she thought that perhaps she had chosen wrong. She was trying to choose someone she thought would be the politically superior being, and she was incorrect. So she's like, well, I'm just going to go home. I obviously made the wrong choice. Yeah, seriously. Matt.
Didn't she try to seduce Octavian before she killed herself so that
Yep.
she could possibly
Yep.
get some
Yep. But Octavian, not quite as, romanticized by the old Cleopatra. So the Battle of Actium happens in 31. And then Octavian becomes the first emperor of Rome in approximately 27 BC.
What happens in those 4 years?
It's probably a lot of political reshuffling, He was really the only person, not strong enough. But he had Caesar's name behind him. And oddly enough, the people assassinated Caesar in 44 BC, and here they are 17 years later, willingly putting his name, if you will, on the throne again. So they kind of came full circle, and they're like, well, maybe he wasn't that bad. Maybe we can actually trust him and his family. Maybe. So he became the first emperor. They still had a senate within the government. But for all practical purposes, the emperor was at the head of every other government office. So he picked the judges. He was in charge of the judicial system. He controlled the Senate. He was in charge of the legislative system. He was the super vote for the consuls. So he was also the executive branch. He was an emperor. Now, in a way, Rome had been in civil war ever since Caesar returned from Gaul, which was 49 BC. So after 22 years of civil war, for the most part, the Romans, from a sociological perspective, were probably just eager to not be in war anymore. Do what you want to do. Be who you want to be. We can't deal, you know? We just need some sort of calm. And so Octavian had an opportunity to bring about the very famously known Pax Romana. And the Pax Romana was a peace, a period of not for, I want to say 40 to 60 years or so. The problem, my friends, is that here we have an emperor who has pretty much supreme control over a widely developing empire. This looks like a pretty attractive political position, right? So all the power-hungry people from the Republic way back when are probably going to want to be in this very, idealistic position of power. And so you'll see as we go through the empire, that the rulers became increasingly, what's the word I'm looking for, corrupt, as they were dealing with a bunch of things, because they were all lining up to be the next guy who is in power. So can you take out classroom?